Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about interviews and bombing. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, would you say that most seasoned programmers bomb in coding interviews? Uh, well, yeah, I would say so. Or well, bomb is it depends a little bit. I do for sure. I do. Uh, I usually save my interviews with like the personal interview. Usually, I always do terribly poorly with the coding tests. Well, almost always when I interview for positions, I always get so nervous and like you start thinking, have I done all the things? Have I thought about all the things, etc., etc. And then yeah, I usually don't do so well, in my opinion, at the very least. But I mean, I've gotten the positions, so I suppose it's not completely horrible. But the same thing goes usually for like when I do the interviews. Most seasoned programmers have. Well, it depends on what you mean by seasoned, because it really comes down to which is what makes this so difficult. Uh, when you interview a software developer, and I think I've said so before as well, it's a little bit difficult for the developer to know what you're going to ask about, because the field, like the area, is gigantic. It's absolutely gigantic. And so when you interview for a job, I mean, it's sort of, I mean, I understand that there are these sorts of people who like go and take course, like they literally study to do the tests at like companies like Google or Facebook or whatever and so forth, because if you want to be fairly sure that you will be able to pass every interview, you're gonna have to have some serious wit and some serious skill in order to pass like the interviews, because you can get, there's so many permutations of everything that can be included in a coding test. And then you have the ones that do like more computer sciencey stuff, which is sort of interesting as well, because how it's not completely clear whether or not that's going to translate all that well into to what you're going to do on the job. And in many cases you have people who have issues with these sorts of computer science questions and so forth. So that's another factor to consider. And so when I talk to like fairly experienced software developers, usually it's not like they bomb. It's that they the ones who know their stuff, who really are like the best of the best, they usually you talk to them and you hear like they know their stuff. They know all their tools, they have in-depth knowledge of everything, they have experience working in the industry, they know how things work, etc., etc. But when you talk to someone who might be who has been working in like a very specific, like maybe in one specific company, or maybe they've been doing the job as a freelancer, or someone who is working at smaller projects or so forth and so forth, who really don't have that in-depth knowledge about the things that they are doing. Like they might be able to produce code, but they're not going to do it very well, if that makes sense. They're still experienced, like they've been working for years. It's just that they never had any requirements on them to actually know anything about the things that they are actually doing. Like, and a classic one, which like every single quote-unquote senior I've ever worked with bombs on testing questions, like most of, especially in front end, like they know nothing almost ever, and they will claim that they know things, and then you ask them about a bit of the theory behind these concepts, and they bomb, like completely bomb. And that's sort of, as I said, that's an indicator too that this individual might know 100 things, but the problem is that they know 100 other things, not the 100 things that the specific company cares about. Now, I mean, I won't lie. I mean, testing is sort of a thing that you should know things about. Well, once again, it depends on the company, right? Because if they've been working for that amount of time, especially, as I said, in front end, it's a little bit special because there's not a culture around testing, and they should all quote unquote do testing. It's just that nobody cares enough to check that they're doing it. So, and like the culture isn't ingrained in them, so they get away with not doing it, and so they don't, and then they get to talk to like companies where they care about that sort of stuff, and then they bomb completely because like it's pointless getting them in because they're just gonna spew out problems for other people to deal with because, as I said, they lack experience in that area, and so a lot of the seniors or like the more experienced software developers that I talk to, it depends. You're not specifically saying senior here, but the seasoned programmer, like someone who's been doing stuff, will bomb during the interviews, and that's why I advocate very much so for having interviews where the coding test gives you a big enough sample size to be able to determine if this person knows how to code, and then rather than focusing very strictly on extremely complicated tasks or something like that, and then having the personal interview be the thing that follows up, where you're basically asking the person in question experience questions, and you should in that scenario have with you someone who really knows IT, who really knows, like a mature software developer who knows how to interview people and knows how to figure out if someone knows their stuff or has in-depth knowledge and so forth, or if it's just someone, as I said, who's well, let's just say, guys, that I've talked to quite a few software developers who are like, they have managed to get a job, and the only reason they're managing to get by is because they work for clients who have very, very poor understanding of good software practices. They have a very weak hiring process, etc., etc. Because these people, like, to be frank with you, some of the companies that I've worked with, they won't be able to fulfill like basic requirements within the job. Like, they don't know how to do things that are pretty basic in these social companies, and this is the thing that I usually say as well, which is that if just because you've mastered a way to do software development, that doesn't matter so much if you want to be applicable for jobs across the board, because, as I said, the range of things that you could possibly have to know is absolutely monstrous. And if you go and take a boot camp or like get yourself a degree or something, and then you go work for like an agency or a consultancy where like the only thing they do is, extreme example, they only work with WordPress, or they only use Tailwind, or they only use Rails or something like that, well, that's not going to transition. Like, you're basically going to learn how to work in that company and companies that are basically identical to that company. But if you want to be the sort of developer who can sort of transition between jobs and do similar things to what I can do or like other people can do, where like it doesn't matter which programming language it is really, and it doesn't really matter which company it is, because you have learned the things that are usually considered to be mainstream, which means that people will consider you for more positions. Well, these are the areas where I see most of the seasoned developers bomb. It's very difficult to find these sorts of, as I call, like true seniors or true true masters of the craft, where like I can trust that this person will be able to figure out how to do things, even if there's like a few tools they haven't worked with or so forth. So what I want you to take away from this is that yes, most seasoned programmers bomb in the coding interview, or I wouldn't say that they fail. I mean, they do get hired. It's more a question of what do you mean by seasoned, because the reality is that quality is more important here. And I've worked. I at this point, to me, like, you can basically wipe your ass with a CV that says the person has worked for this amount of years, usually, as when they pass like a certain like amount. If it's over 4 years or 5 years or something like that, it doesn't tell you much more. I've talked to many managers and recruiters, and I've done code interviews, and I've done checked code tests where like the person has produced an absolute, like the code isn't working, the application, like the coding patterns like they've used is absolutely, like, it's not up to like a professional level whatsoever in any way. It really indicates that they don't really know how to do this. And I've even said, so I would put this person as a junior, and then they go, wow, they claim to have 8 years of experience on paper, and I go, yeah, Uh, that doesn't matter because it's down to the quality of the person. For what people have a hard time understanding is that just because you have worked a certain amount of years doesn't mean that you're good at what you do, because the software industry is not is so big, so vast, and so diverse that for you to be quote unquote really good in a general sense, you have to be pretty in tune with what is considered mainstream and what is actually required, because you can get by with a lot of stuff. You can get by and doing a lot of stuff with like fairly subpar skills, because the range of the complexities of things that you might be doing can vary that much. In one, as I said, in one company you might be able to swing to not actually know anything really about any of the theory behind stuff, or like how to write tests or do any of that sort of stuff. And in the next company, like the companies Google, etc., like with higher requirements, like which this is the stuff that they're taught usually in like as a this is this is where you're basically forced to work in the way that the most like mainstream way of working. That's when you start seeing that, oh shit, I actually have the skills to work in these agencies here, or like as a consultant, because most of my customers don't actually know how to interview, like they don't know what they're looking for. As long as the code is quote unquote working, they're happy. That level, and the difference between that level and the level I'm talking about, is pretty significant. And as I said, when you find someone who's been primarily working in that area, uh, they basically like they bomb every single time because they don't actually know anything in depth about their craft. Have a great day.